All right, welcome to the next episode of this Harmless podcast, and we're going to be reading again from The Mortification of Sin by John Owen, and we are in chapter 8, the second half of chapter 8, and this second half is about the reasons for the predominance of a particular lust. Okay, chapter 8 started with, if I scroll back here, one of my favorite quotes actually. Chapter 8, a universal sincerity needed, and in some of the second general rules, strive to mortify all lusts or fail to mortify any lust. Okay. And so we went through the first part of that. I thought that was really good, very helpful. But we're ready now for the second half of chapter 8. As you can see, I started to record it the other day, but got interrupted. So there are some markings on here already, but I'm going to read it again. Reasons for the predominance of a particular lust. Okay. The rage and predominance of a particular lust is usually the result of a careless, negligent course in general, and that is for two reasons. Okay. So, negligent course. Okay. So, the person is being negligent in their mortification duty. Okay. So, two reasons for that. Number one, as its natural effect. Lust, as I showed in general, lies in the heart of everyone while he lives, even the best of us. Do not think the scripture is just so many words when it says that sin is subtle, cunning, and crafty, that it seduces and entices us, fights and rebels against us. The heart is the source and the fountain from which flow all the issues of life and death. As long as a man keeps a diligent watch over his heart, lust withers and dies in it. But if it breaks its restraints through negligence, it may gain passage to our thoughts through previously suppressed desires. And by these thoughts, perhaps it breaks out into open sin in our life. Its strength is applied to the way out that it has found. It continues to press for release by that same way until it gains open passage. It then annoys and torments us and will not be easily restrained. This is how a man ends up wrestling with a lust in sorrow all his life that might easily have been prevented by strict and universal watch. Number two, as punishment for other sins. As I said, God often endures a sin to punish our other oversights. With wicked men, he gives them over to one as the judgment for another, a greater for the punishment of a lesser. He substitutes one that will hold them more securely for one from which they might have escaped. So too with his own people. He may leave them with some irksome compulsion to prevent or cure some other evil. That was the case when the messenger of Satan was let loose on Paul so that he might not be made haughty through extraordinary spiritual revelations. Was it not punishment for Peter's smug confidence that he was left to deny his master? Now, I would like to point out here, I've often wondered about this myself. This particular part right here, it says, this was the case when the messenger of Satan was let loose on Paul so that he might not be made haughty through extraordinary spiritual revelations. For those of you that don't know what he's talking about, there's a passage where Paul the Apostle talks about a thorn in the flesh, a messenger of Satan. And people have often speculated what it was, possibly was it a physical ailment. I have always wondered and kind of landed on the possibility or the probability that it was actually some temptation, some desire, some sinful temptation that he was wrestling with or battling with. And it's interesting to me that John Owen seems to lean in that direction as well. I think that that's very much possibly what it could be, and I think in all probability what it was. Um, anyway, I think that's an important thought that can be discussed. But as punishment for other sins, and I know that we don't like in our modern usage of this the word punishment. I know that people go, we're not getting punished as Christians. We don't get punished. I think he's still speaking about this in terms of the way like if I were to punish my son, that's discipline. I might call it punishment, but I'm talking about discipline. It's not an ultimate judgment. Okay, that we're going to be experiencing. Let me go on. It may be that God often allows this common state of lust to continue. He does so at least to admonish us, maybe to humble us, and perhaps to chasten and correct us for our generally loose and careless walk. If so, it is conceivable that the effect would be removed. I'm sorry, I'm reading this incorrectly. If so, is it conceivable that the effect would be removed while the cause continued? That is, could the particular lust be mortified while the general condition remained unreformed? John Owen says doubtful. If someone really thoroughly and acceptably mortified a disturbing lust, he had better take care to be equally diligent in all aspects of his obedience. He must know that every lust, every omission of duty, is as burdensome to God as it is to him. When disloyalty continues in the heart by indulging negligence and not pressing for universal and perfect obedience, the soul becomes weak. It is not giving faith its whole effort, and so it becomes selfish. It is concerned more with the trouble of sin than the filth and guilt of it. So true. I'll highlight that. Where is it at? There it is. Is concerned more with the trouble of sin than the filth and guilt of it. The soul in such a state constantly provokes God. It should not expect a comfortable resolution to a single spiritual duty it undertakes, much less this universal duty under consideration. To accomplish that would require a wholly different attitude. All right, that was the rest of chapter 8. Next time we'll be talking about chapter 9, symptoms of a particular lust, and we'll talk about those things in chapter 9. Thank you for listening to this episode of this podcast, and I hope that all this has been helpful. Please feel free to send questions, comments, concerns to me. Don't forget to subscribe, however one would do that. Subscribe to the podcast. I'd appreciate it. Thank you.